So the Chinese government has been putting out statements saying that they're ready for any kind of war, whether it be a trade war or a physical war, in response to Trump's tariffs. I believe Trump put a something like a 10% across the board tariff on Chinese goods. And they've been dishing out this rhetoric, which Hegseth has responded to in his legacy media interviews. But and it's pretty absurd. The Chinese government has always been absurd. The propaganda they put out. I remember a long time ago when there was a lot of theories about what exactly happened on 9/11. There was a statement within China saying that the Chinese were responsible, that China actually took credit for what happened in 9/11. Just absurd things like this. And it's because in China, it's like they have this weird like cult of personality to the state. And it's like everybody's trying to kiss the butt of the Chinese government, trying to say, how nationalistic, how, and I quote, patriotic they are. It's not patriotism, it's actually nationalism. How pro-authoritarian they are to that system. So, they issue this rhetoric. And this is, and like I said, it seems like they've been getting a little bit worse over time. And we saw what happened during COVID. They were welding people in their apartments during this whole thing. They were sanitizing airport runways during COVID. Just absolutely absurd things like this. But now they're threatening physical war against the United States because we won't just open our markets to them. Like, it's like, can you imagine if somebody put a gun to someone's head and says, you will be open for business? It kind of reminds me of National Lampoon's Vacation, where Clark Griswold buys a starting pistol and says, holds the security guard up and says, you will open this party. It's that level of absurdity. The Chinese government is threatening war against the United States if they don't open up their markets. Like we have an obligation to do that. Not that China's been manipulating their currency and dumping their products, onto the United States. Not that they've been operating, with their debt trap agenda in the Western Hemisphere, like in places like Uruguay, for example. That China has been trying to screw the United States, the very country that has opened up the markets all around the world, that has allowed China to do what it's doing. I mean, China has had this explosive economic growth in large part because, partly because of the technology, which, by the way, they've stolen a lot of our technology, but also in large part because they've been able to access raw materials cheaply and have been able to dump their products onto the United States and to other developed countries. So, to threaten war, I mean, it's really desperation is what it is. It's that China couldn't survive a trade war with the United States. They're already skating on thin ice with their banking and their government debt sectors, way over leveraged. I mean, you can see, cities that are unoccupied because the government was pumping, pumping these companies to do all this building because you had this massive bubble, this huge real estate bubble in China. You talk about malinvestment, but anyway, so it's absolutely absurd that China would do this rhetoric, and all the United States would have to do is put a complete tariff, or to cut their trade off in the Indian Ocean. The Chinese Navy, yes, they have a large Navy, but it's made for defending the Chinese coastline. Yes, they do have things that they could do. I'm not a military expert, but China needs the rest of the world economically more than the rest of the world needs China. So, and there's a lot more I can go on and saying about that. You know, that labor in other countries like Mexico is cheaper. In Vietnam, it's cheaper. So China is not the low cost producer either. They're not the most technologically advanced producer. They're not the most stable producer of anything. Yes, the Chinese people are hardworking people, but you know, I mean, you look at the situation in China, and you understand why they would threaten to go to war if they're in a trade war. They can't survive a trade war. That's why.